Thomas Mitchell had already driven past her. 200 meters back, a figure in the rain with no jacket, backpack soaked through. He checked the clock. 11:47 p.m., 40 minutes late already. Sophie asleep at Mrs. Rodriguez's house, waiting for him to pick her up before 6 in the morning. His hands gripped the wheel tighter, eyes fixed on the road ahead, trying not to think about the shape he'd just passed. The rearview mirror showed the girl getting smaller in the darkness, rain falling harder. Brakes screamed. The truck swung around. Thomas didn't know why. He only knew he couldn't keep driving. The headlights caught her again half a mile back. 19, maybe 20. Walking with the kind of determination that said she'd made peace with whatever came next. Thomas pulled onto the shoulder and leaned across to roll down the passenger window. Rain immediately spattered the seat. "You need a ride." She kept walking. Didn't even glance over. Thomas eased the truck forward, keeping pace. "It's 11 at night. You're soaked. Next town's 40 miles. I'm fine." Her voice carried the flat tone of someone who'd stopped expecting help a long time ago. Thomas had heard that sound before, in his own voice, 3 years back, standing in a hospital billing office with Sophie's hand in his, and no idea how to pay for the funeral. "Route 40 at midnight in November is not fine," he said. "I've got a daughter about your age. If she was out here, I'd hope someone would stop." That made the girl pause. She turned, water streaming down her face, and studied the truck cab with the careful assessment of someone who'd learned to calculate risk quickly. Thomas kept his hands visible on the wheel. "How old's your daughter?" she asked. 8. Something shifted in her expression. Not trust exactly, but a recalculation. She walked to the passenger door and opened it. "I'm only going as far as Dayton." "That's 2 hours. Get in." She climbed up, bringing a rush of cold air and rain with her. Water pooled immediately on the floor mat. She pulled the door shut and sat pressed against it. Backpack clutched in her lap like it held everything that mattered. Probably did. Thomas merged back onto the highway. The wipers beat steady rhythm against the windshield. The girl stared straight ahead, jaw tight. "There's a towel behind your seat," Thomas said. "Cleaner than what you're currently experiencing." She reached back without speaking, found the faded blue towel, and began drying her face. Her hands shook. Cold, most likely. Maybe something else. "I'm Thomas." "Mackenzie." The silence stretched. Thomas let it. Some people needed quiet more than conversation. "Rest stops are closed," he said after a few miles. "Construction? You got somewhere to stay in Dayton tonight?" The way Mackenzie's shoulders tensed told him everything. "There's supposed to be someone," she said carefully. "My aunt." "Supposed to be? I haven't talked to her in a while." Thomas checked his mirrors, thinking. The exit for his place was coming up in 20 minutes. Sophie was safe at Mrs. Rodriguez's. He had a couch. The math was simple, even if the situation wasn't. "Listen," he said. "My place is about 40 minutes from here. You can sleep on the couch tonight, and I'll drive you to the bus station in the morning. No expectations, no questions you don't want to answer." Mackenzie turned to look at him. Really look. "Why would you do that?" "Because leaving you at a closed rest stop isn't something I can live with." He kept his voice level, matter of fact. "And because I've been in positions where I needed help and didn't get it. I know what that costs." She was quiet for a long moment, studying his profile in the dashboard light. "Okay," she said finally. "Thank you." Thomas's rental house sat at the end of a street where people minded their business and fixed their own problems. He pulled into the driveway just past midnight. The porch light was on. Mrs. Rodriguez always left it burning when she watched Sophie overnight. Inside, the house showed its lived-in truth. Medical bills stacked on the kitchen counter. Sophie's math homework covering the table. Photos held to the refrigerator by magnets, shaped like pickup trucks, and coffee cups. The coffee maker had seen better decades. Mackenzie stood on the doormat, dripping, looking like she'd forgotten what the inside of a home was supposed to feel like. "Bathroom's down the hall," Thomas said. "Clean towels in the cabinet. Couch folds out if you need it. I have to pick up Sophie at 5:30, so I'll be up early. We can sort out the bus station after breakfast." Mackenzie nodded, still clutching that backpack. "There's leftover Chinese in the fridge if you're hungry. Help yourself to anything." "Thank you." The words came out rough, unpracticed. Thomas headed toward his room but stopped at the doorway. "Mackenzie, lock the front door after I'm in my room. Just to be safe." He didn't wait for her response. Some things people needed to do on their own terms. The alarm cut through the dark at 5:20. Thomas dressed by muscle memory. 3 years of single parenting had trained his body to function before his brain fully engaged. When he emerged, Mackenzie was already awake on the couch, blanket folded neatly beside her, backpack at her feet. "You sleep at all?" he asked. "Some." Thomas started the coffee maker. It gurgled and hissed, filling the kitchen with the smell that marked the boundary between night and day. He pulled down 2 mugs. "How do you take it?" "Black." He poured and handed her one. They stood in the pre-dawn quiet, drinking coffee and not talking. The silence felt comfortable in a way Thomas hadn't expected. "I need to get Sophie," he said eventually. "You can come along or wait here. Either way, I'll be back in 20 minutes. "I'll come." Mrs. Rodriguez answered her door in a bathrobe, Sophie already dressed and bouncing in the hallway behind her. "Daddy!" Thomas caught Sophie as she launched at him, swinging her up in one practiced motion. "Hey, Bug, you good?" Mrs. Rodriguez made pancakes, the really good kind with blueberries. "Did she now?" Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes went to Mackenzie standing on the porch. The older woman's expression shifted, protective, assessing, the look of someone who'd raised 4 children and wasn't about to let anything happen to the one she watched. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Mackenzie. She's staying with us temporarily." "Temporarily." Mrs. Rodriguez made it both statement and question. "Just until she gets where she's going?" Mrs. Rodriguez looked at Mackenzie for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You need anything, Thomas. You call. Anytime. Appreciate it." In the truck, Sophie stared at Mackenzie from the back seat, with the unfiltered curiosity only 8-year-olds possessed. "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" "Sophie," Thomas said. "I'm just asking." Mackenzie turned in her seat. "No, I'm just someone your dad helped." "Oh." Sophie processed this. "Do you like pancakes? Daddy makes really good ones. Not as good as Mrs. Rodriguez, but still really good." The corner of Mackenzie's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I like pancakes." "Good, because we're having them for breakfast." Back home, Thomas made pancakes, while Sophie provided Mackenzie with a detailed account of her entire previous evening, complete with commentary on Mrs. Rodriguez's cat, the movie they'd watched, and the dream she'd had about penguins. Mackenzie listened with what looked like genuine attention, asking small questions that kept Sophie's narrative flowing. By the time Thomas set plates down, Sophie had moved on to explaining her school's complex social hierarchy. "Okay, Bug," Thomas said. "Let Mackenzie eat." They ate in companionable quiet. Sophie swung her feet against the chair. Mackenzie cut her pancakes into precise squares. Thomas's phone buzzed on the counter. He checked it and felt his stomach tighten. 3 missed calls from dispatch, 2 voicemails. "Excuse me a second," he said, standing. In the hallway, he dialed Randy. "Mitchell, thank God. Where are you?" "Home. What's wrong?" "Peterson's out sick. Food poisoning. We need someone on the Toledo route. 3-day haul leaving this morning. You're up." Thomas closed his eyes. "Randy, I can't." "Sophie." "Can't or won't?" "Can't. Mrs. Rodriguez is visiting family in Chicago. I don't have childcare. Then find some. This is the 3rd time this quarter, Thomas. Corporate's watching these numbers. I'm trying to help you out here, but my hands are getting tied." The threat hung there, unspoken, but clear. One more refusal, and Thomas would be looking for new work. In this economy, with his schedule needs, that could take months. "Give me an hour," Thomas said. "I'll call you back." He returned to the kitchen. Mackenzie was clearing plates, while Sophie explained the rules of some elaborate game involving stuffed animals and complex alliances. Mackenzie looked up when Thomas entered. "Problem? Work needs me to take a 3-day run, starting today." He sat down heavily. "Mrs. Rodriguez is out of town. I don't have anyone to watch Sophie." Sophie's face fell. "But you said we'd work on my science project." "I know, Bug. I'm sorry." Mackenzie set the plates in the sink and turned around. "I could stay." Thomas looked at her. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm offering." "Mackenzie, I can't ask you to watch my kid for 3 days. You don't even know us." "You're not asking. I'm volunteering." She crossed her arms. "I don't have anywhere to be right now anyway." Sophie looked between them with wide eyes. "Really? Mackenzie can stay." Thomas studied Mackenzie's face, searching for obligation or hesitation. What he found instead was something he recognized from his own mirror. Someone who needed to be useful, to have purpose, to feel like they weren't just taking up space. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure." Thomas pulled 2 20s from his wallet. "Emergency money. My number's on the fridge. Mrs. Rodriguez's too, though she won't be back until Friday. If anything happens, anything at all, you call me immediately." Mackenzie took the money. "We'll be fine." He looked at Sophie. "You listen to Mackenzie while I'm gone, yeah? She's in charge." "Okay, Daddy." Thomas called Randy back and took the run. The truck felt different pulling out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, Sophie waved from the porch, Mackenzie standing beside her with one hand on Sophie's shoulder. It should have felt reckless, leaving his daughter with a stranger he'd picked up 12 hours ago off a highway. It should have felt like the setup for every cautionary tale about misplaced trust. Instead, it felt like the first genuinely right decision he'd made in 3 years. The Toledo run was straightforward. Good weather, light traffic, familiar route. Thomas drove on autopilot, phone in the cup holder within constant reach. No calls came. At every rest stop, he texted, "Everything okay?" The responses came back consistent. "We're good." On the second day, Mackenzie sent a photo. Sophie at the kitchen table, tongue sticking out in concentration, working on something with construction paper. The caption read, "Science project in progress." Thomas saved the image. He called that night during Sophie's bedtime routine. "Daddy! Guess what?" Sophie's voice exploded through the speaker. "Mackenzie and me made a volcano, and it actually erupted. Well, kind of. The baking soda didn't fizz as much as we wanted, because Mackenzie said we needed more vinegar. But it still worked. And she let me have ice cream even though it was after 7. But she said just this once, because we finished the project early. And we watched this movie about dolphins. Did you know dolphins sleep with one eye open? That's so weird." "That does sound weird," Thomas said. "You being good for Mackenzie?" "Uh-huh. She's really nice, Daddy. She doesn't get annoyed when I ask a million questions." "That's good, Bug. Put her on for a second." Shuffling sounds, then Mackenzie's voice. "Hey, everything actually okay there?" "Yeah, Sophie's great. Easy kid." "She hasn't driven you completely crazy yet?" "Not yet." A pause. "She talks about you constantly." "Good things." Something in Thomas's chest tightened. "Well, she's a good kid. I can tell." Silence stretched between them, comfortable despite the distance. "Thank you," Thomas said, "for doing this." "You already thanked me." "Stop thanking me." "Mackenzie, I mean it. You gave me a place to stay when you had zero obligation. It's the least I can do." Thomas heard something in her voice, not gratitude exactly, more like relief, like being useful was its own form of shelter. "Get some sleep," he said. "I'll be back tomorrow around 6. We'll be here." The third day stretched longer than the first two combined. Thomas found himself checking the clock constantly, calculating drive times, wondering if he could shave 20 minutes by taking back roads. He made it home at 5:40. The house smelled different when he walked in. Not bad, different. Just lived in, like someone had been cooking and existing in the space. Sophie ran to meet him, still talking about the dolphin documentary. Behind her, Mackenzie stood in the kitchen doorway, hands in her pockets. "You survived," Thomas said. "Barely." But she was almost smiling. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Thomas found Mackenzie on the front porch. She sat on the steps, looking out at the street where moths circled the streetlight in hypnotic patterns. "Mind if I sit?" She shook her head. Thomas lowered himself onto the step beside her. The wood still held the day's warmth. Crickets sang in the neighbor's overgrown yard. "I called about the bus to Dayton," Mackenzie said. "There's one tomorrow at 10:15. "Right. I should probably take it." "Probably." Neither of them moved. "My aunt's not there anymore," Mackenzie said suddenly. Her voice stayed level, factual. "In Dayton. I looked her up. She moved about 6 months ago. No forwarding address listed." Thomas didn't respond immediately. Sometimes silence was the only appropriate answer. "So I don't actually have anywhere to go," Mackenzie continued. "My stepmom's been calling. 17 missed calls. She wants me to come home, move back in with my dad." She paused. "But that's not an option." "Why not?" "Because he's the reason I left." Thomas looked at her profile in the porch light. She stared straight ahead, jaw set. "You don't have to tell me," he said quietly. "I know." A car drove past, headlights sweeping across them briefly before darkness returned. "He hit my mom," Mackenzie said finally, "for years. Then she died. Cancer. And my stepmom married him 6 months later because she thought he'd changed. Thought having a teenager around would settle him down." She laughed without humor. "Spoiler, it didn't." Thomas felt his hands curl into fists. He deliberately relaxed them. "He ever hit you?" "Once. I was 17. I hit back." Her voice carried no pride, just fact. "That's when I left the first time. Stayed with my aunt for 8 months until she moved for work. Then I tried college for a semester, but I couldn't afford it without my dad's help, and accepting his money meant accepting his conditions. So you left again. So I left again." Thomas let that sit between them. Moths continued their dance around the streetlight. "Stay here," he said. Mackenzie turned to look at him. "What?" "Stay. Not forever. Just until you figure out your next move. There's a coffee shop downtown that's almost always hiring. You could work, save money, make a plan from somewhere stable instead of from a bus station or a highway shoulder." "Thomas, I can't." "You'd help with Sophie. I'd pay you for that. $200 a week for watching her after school when I'm working. That's fair market rate." He was building this as he spoke, constructing something that might hold. "You'd have your own space, your own room. No strings attached beyond helping with Sophie when I need it. Why would you do this? Because 3 years ago I watched my wife die in a hospital room with debts I'll be paying off for another decade. Because I know what it's like to have nowhere safe to land. Because my daughter likes you, and Sophie's got better judgment than most adults I know." He paused. "And because I think maybe you need this as much as we do." Mackenzie was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Okay. Yeah, I'll stay. For a while." "Okay then." They sat there until the streetlight flickered and the moths dispersed. Two people who'd found each other by accident, learning how to exist in the same space without apology. The next morning felt different. Mackenzie made coffee. Sophie came out in her pajamas, hair sticking up in 3 directions. Thomas poured cereal. Simple morning things that shouldn't have felt significant, but somehow did. "Can we have pancakes?" Sophie asked. "I thought you wanted cereal," Thomas said. "I changed my mind. Mackenzie said she'd help me make them." Thomas looked at Mackenzie, who shrugged. "If that's okay." "Yeah, that's fine." He watched them work together at the stove. Sophie standing on a chair to reach the griddle. Mackenzie guiding her hands with the measuring cup. Sophie's tongue stuck out in concentration. Mackenzie's movements were patient, unhurried. This could work, Thomas thought. This strange, accidental arrangement. It could actually work. 3 weeks fell into rhythm. Mackenzie got the job at the coffee shop. Morning shifts, weekdays. Thomas adjusted his routes to match her schedule. Sophie went to school, came home to Mackenzie, did homework at the kitchen table, while Mackenzie made simple dinners. Normal rhythms, ordinary routines. The kind of domestic patterns that shouldn't have felt revolutionary, but somehow did. Thomas noticed changes in small increments. The house stayed cleaner without anyone assigning chores. Mackenzie started contributing to groceries with her own money, insisting on paying her share. Sophie's laugh sounded lighter, like she'd been carrying something heavy she could finally set down. One Thursday afternoon, Thomas came home early to find them in the backyard. Mackenzie was teaching Sophie to throw a football, demonstrating the grip and release with patient precision. Sophie's throws went wild and enthusiastic in every direction except the intended one. Mackenzie didn't correct her constantly or push for immediate improvement. She just kept catching and throwing back, steady and reliable. Thomas stood at the kitchen window watching, feeling something in his chest expand. Not breaking, making room. His phone rang. Dispatch. "Mitchell, we've got a situation. Denver run. 5 days, starting tomorrow morning." "Randy, I can't do 5 days." "Sophie, I know what you've got going on, and I'm telling you straight. You take this run or we're done." "That's not a threat, Thomas. That's just where we are with corporate." Thomas looked out at the backyard. Sophie had tackled Mackenzie, who was laughing and half-heartedly trying to escape, while Sophie clung like a determined monkey. "I'll take it," he said. At dinner, he told them. Sophie's face fell exactly as he knew it would. 5 whole days? "I'm sorry, Bug." Sophie turned to Mackenzie. "Will you still be here?" "Of course. The whole time?" Mackenzie glanced at Thomas. Something passed between them that needed no translation. "The whole time," she said. The Denver run was longer and harder than Toledo. Thomas pushed through, maintained schedule, checked in twice daily. The photos Mackenzie sent became anchors. Sophie making pancakes with flour everywhere. Sophie reading on the couch with Mackenzie beside her, both absorbed in their own books. Sophie asleep with the stuffed rabbit Thomas's wife had given her 3 years ago. On the 4th night, Thomas called after Sophie's bedtime. Mackenzie answered immediately. "She okay?" "She's fine, asleep." A pause. "But she asked me something today." "What?" "She asked if I was going to leave, like her mom did." Thomas sat up in the truck's sleeper cab. "What did you say?" "I told her I didn't know, because I don't." Mackenzie's voice was quiet. "My stepmom found me. She came by the coffee shop today during my shift. Said my dad wants to apologize, that he's in therapy now, getting help. She said he's really changed this time." Thomas's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. Part of me thinks maybe people really can change. Maybe I should give him another chance. And the other part? The other part remembers the look on his face that night, the sound his fist made when she stopped. The other part knows better. Mackenzie, I can't tell you what choice to make, but I can tell you this. You don't owe anyone a second chance just because you share DNA. You get to protect yourself. You get to choose who counts as family." Silence stretched across the line. Is that what we are? Mackenzie asked quietly. Family. Thomas thought about Sophie's laugh, about coming home to a house that didn't echo anymore, about Mackenzie folding laundry without being asked, making coffee before he woke up, existing in his life like she'd always been there. Yeah, he said. I think maybe we are. He heard her breath catch. Okay. Okay? Okay, I'm staying. I'll tell my stepmom tomorrow that I'm not coming back. You're sure? I'm sure. Thomas pulled into the driveway late on the 5th day, exhausted and road-worn. The house was dark except for the porch light. He found a note on the kitchen table in Mackenzie's handwriting. Sophie's asleep. Leftovers in fridge. Glad you're home. He stood holding that note, reading those simple words over and over, and felt something he hadn't felt since his wife died, like he belonged to something larger than just survival. The nightmares started in the 3rd month. Thomas would wake to sounds from Mackenzie's room, muffled crying, bed springs creaking as she jolted awake. He never went to her door, never violated her privacy, but he started leaving a glass of water on the hall table, close enough for her to find if she came out. The glass was always empty in the morning. One night Sophie woke too. She appeared in Thomas's doorway, rabbit clutched to her chest. Daddy? Mackenzie's having bad dreams. I know, Bug. Should we help her? Thomas pulled Sophie onto the bed. Sometimes the best help is just being here when someone needs us, letting them know they're not alone. Is Mackenzie alone? Not anymore. Sophie considered this with the gravity she gave all important matters. Because she has us now. That's right. And we have her. Yeah, Bug. We have her too. One Thursday morning, 4 months after that rainy night on Route 40, Thomas woke to find both Mackenzie and Sophie already in the kitchen. Mackenzie was making pancakes. Sophie sat at the table drawing with colored pencils, tongue stuck out in concentration. Morning, Thomas said, reaching for the coffee pot. Morning, Daddy. Look what I made. She held up her drawing, 3 people standing in front of a house, labels underneath in careful print. Daddy, me, Mac. That's really good, Bug. It's our family, Sophie said simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Thomas caught Mackenzie's eye over Sophie's head. She was staring at the drawing, spatula frozen mid-flip. Yeah, Thomas said quietly. It is. Later, after Sophie left for school, Mackenzie sat at the table with her laptop open. Thomas refilled his coffee and sat across from her. I enrolled, she said without looking up. Online classes through community college. Just 2 courses to start. I'm not sure what I want to study yet, but that's good. Really good. I'm using money I saved from the coffee shop. I don't want you to think, Mackenzie. Thomas waited until she looked at him. I don't think anything except that you're making smart choices, building something for yourself. She nodded, some tension leaving her shoulders. Also, she said, I'm not taking payment for watching Sophie anymore. It's not a job. It's just what I do. Thomas considered arguing, decided against it. Some things were better acknowledged through acceptance than debate. Okay. They sat in comfortable silence, him with his coffee, her with her laptop. Morning light came through the kitchen window at an angle that made everything look softer. Outside, someone was mowing their lawn. A dog barked, normal sounds of a normal Thursday. Sophie asked me yesterday what she should call me, Mackenzie said. She said, Mackenzie feels too formal, but she knows I'm not her mom, and she doesn't know what the right word is. What did you tell her? I said she could call me whatever felt right. Mackenzie's voice went quiet. She said she wanted to call me Mac, like family. And I said, that sounded perfect. Thomas smiled into his coffee. Good. That afternoon, Thomas picked up Sophie from school and drove straight to the hardware store instead of heading home. "Where are we going?" Sophie asked from the back seat. "Hardware store. I need to pick something up. Can I get paint?" "What do you need paint for?" "For my room. Max said if it was okay with you, we could paint it. Not all of it. Just one wall." She said I could pick the color. Thomas glanced in the rearview mirror at his daughter's hopeful face. "What color are you thinking?" "Teal, like the ocean." "Teal it is." They spent that evening painting Sophie's room, the three of them in old t-shirts, drop cloth on the floor, Sophie wielding a roller with more enthusiasm than precision. Mackenzie patiently fixed the spots where paint dripped or streaked. Thomas worked on the trim. They listened to Sophie's playlist, a chaotic mix of pop songs and movie soundtracks. "This looks really good, Bug," Thomas said, stepping back to survey their work. "It looks like the ocean," Sophie said with satisfaction. "Now when I wake up, I'll think about swimming." "Even in winter?" Mackenzie asked. "Especially in winter, because the ocean doesn't freeze." After Sophie went to bed, earlier than usual, exhausted from painting, Thomas and Mackenzie stood in the hallway, looking at the freshly painted wall. "She's happy," Mackenzie said softly. "Yeah, she is." "I've never—" Mackenzie stopped, started again. "I've never been part of something like this before, something that feels permanent." "Does it feel permanent to you?" She looked at him. "It's starting to." 6 months in, Thomas came home from a short local run to find Mackenzie on the porch with her laptop. He sat down beside her without speaking. It was their spot now, where important conversations happened, where silence felt right. "I got accepted," Mackenzie said. "To what?" "There's a scholarship program for students who've experienced family violence, full tuition, books, even a small living stipend." She was staring at her laptop screen like she couldn't quite believe what it said. "I applied 2 months ago. Didn't think I'd get it, but you got it." "I got it." Thomas felt pride swell in his chest. "That's incredible, Mackenzie. Really incredible. It means I could go full-time next semester, actually finish a degree." She looked at him. "But it would mean less hours at the coffee shop. I wouldn't be able to pay you as much for room and board." "You don't pay me anything for room and board." "Thomas, you help with Sophie. You contribute to groceries. You make this house feel like a home instead of a place I sleep between roots." He shook his head. "If anything, I should be paying you more." "That's not. Take the scholarship, go full-time. We'll figure out the logistics." Mackenzie was quiet for a long moment. "Why do you keep doing this? Helping me?" "Because someone should have helped you a long time ago. Because you deserve a shot at building the life you want. Because," he paused, finding the right words. "Because you're family, Mackenzie. That's what family does." She looked away quickly, but not before Thomas saw her eyes fill. "Thank you," she said, voice rough. "Stop thanking me. Never." They sat there as evening turned to night, moths gathering around the porch light, the neighborhood settling into its familiar rhythms. Inside, Sophie slept peacefully in her ocean-colored room. Tomorrow would bring new roots, new challenges, new moments requiring choice. But tonight, everyone was home. That Saturday, Thomas was fixing the front porch railing, something he'd been meaning to do for 6 months, when Sophie and Mackenzie came outside carrying craft supplies. "What's all this?" he asked. "We're making a sign," Sophie announced, "for the front door." "What kind of sign?" "A welcome sign, with our names on it." Thomas watched as they spread supplies on the porch, wooden plaque, paints, brushes. Sophie had already sketched out the design. Mitchell House in careful letters, with 3 stick figures underneath. "This one's you," Sophie said, pointing to the tallest figure. "This one's me, and this one's Mac." Mackenzie was studying the design with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to a craft project. Thomas recognized that look, the way people examined proof that they belonged somewhere. "It looks perfect, Bug," he said. They spent the afternoon painting. Sophie did most of the letters, tongue stuck out in concentration. Mackenzie helped with the details. Thomas provided encouragement and kept the lemonade flowing. When they finished, the sign wasn't perfect. Some letters were bigger than others. The stick figures looked slightly drunk, but it was theirs. "We have to let it dry overnight," Mackenzie said. "Then we can hang it tomorrow." "Tomorrow's Sunday," Sophie said. "We should celebrate. Can we have pancakes for dinner?" Thomas laughed. "Pancakes for dinner? Sure, why not?" That night, after dinner pancakes, and after Sophie had gone to bed, Thomas found Mackenzie cleaning paintbrushes at the kitchen sink. "You don't have to do that tonight," he said. "They can wait." "I don't mind." He leaned against the counter, watching her work. "Thank you for doing this with Sophie. The sign, I mean. It means something to her, having you included. It means something to me, too." Mackenzie set down the last brush, dried her hands. "I've never had my name on a door before. Not like this. Not where it meant I was chosen, not just stuck there by birth." "You were chosen," Thomas said quietly. "Every day we choose you. I hope you know that." Mackenzie nodded, not trusting her voice. The next morning, they hung the sign together. Thomas holding the ladder, Mackenzie securing the screws, Sophie supervising from below. When it was up, they all stepped back to look. "It's perfect," Sophie declared. "Yeah," Thomas agreed. "It really is." 7 months after that rainy night on Route 40, Thomas got a call from Randy during dinner. "Got a situation," Randy said. "Big client, special delivery. Needs to get to Dayton by tomorrow night. Offering triple rate." Thomas felt Mackenzie stiffen across the table. She'd heard him say, Dayton. "I'll take it," Thomas said. After he hung up, Sophie looked between them. "Are you going away again, Daddy?" "Just for 2 days this time. Day there, day back." "Can Mac and me come?" Thomas started to say no, started to explain that it was a work trip, that they'd be sitting in a truck for hours, that it would be boring. But then he caught Mackenzie's expression, something careful and hopeful at the same time. "Why not?" he said. "If Mackenzie's okay with it?" "I'm okay with it," Mackenzie said quickly. They left early the next morning, Sophie wedged between them on the truck's bench seat, backpack full of books and snacks. The highway stretched ahead, familiar and endless. Sophie narrated everything they passed for the first hour, then fell asleep against Mackenzie's shoulder. "You don't have to do this," Mackenzie said quietly. "Go to Dayton, I mean. I know it's where I was trying to get that night. I know, but maybe you need to see it. Close that chapter properly." "You saved mine too," Thomas said. "Maybe not as dramatically, but just as real. You reminded me what a home sounds like when it has more than 2 people in it. What hope feels like when you've forgotten the taste." They pulled into Dayton just after noon. Thomas made the delivery while Mackenzie and Sophie waited in the truck. Then, without discussing it, he drove to the address Mackenzie had been carrying in her backpack for 7 months. The house was still there. Still empty. A for rent sign in the yard now, grass overgrown. "Want to get out?" Thomas asked. Mackenzie shook her head. "No, I just needed to see it, to know for sure." Sophie woke up, looked around. "Where are we?" "Dayton," Mackenzie said. "The place I was trying to get to before I met you and your dad. Do you wish you'd gotten here that night?" Mackenzie looked at the empty house, then at Sophie, then at Thomas. "No," she said. "I really don't." "Good," Sophie said simply, "because then we wouldn't be a family." Thomas put the truck in gear and pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, the house grew smaller, then disappeared. Mackenzie watched it go without looking back. On the drive home, Sophie talked about her upcoming school project, about the book she was reading, about whether or not penguins could live in Ohio if they really wanted to. Thomas drove and listened and felt something settle in his chest, something that felt like peace. They pulled into their driveway just as the sun was setting. The sign they'd made hung on the front door, slightly crooked but exactly right. Sophie ran ahead to unlock it, while Thomas and Mackenzie gathered bags from the truck. "Welcome home," Thomas said. Mackenzie smiled. "Yeah, home." That night, Thomas sat at the kitchen table going through bills, while Mackenzie worked on her laptop, and Sophie colored at the other end. The dishwasher hummed. The coffee maker gurgled, brewing a pot for tomorrow morning. Normal sounds of a normal evening. Sophie held up her drawing. "Look, Daddy, I made one for Mac to put in her room." It was another family portrait. 3 people, 1 house, a son in the corner with a smiley face. "It's beautiful, Bug," Thomas said. "I made the son happy," Sophie explained, "because that's how I feel when we're all together." Mackenzie had stopped typing. She was staring at the drawing, eyes bright. "Do you like it, Mac?" Sophie asked. "I love it," Mackenzie said softly. "It's the best thing anyone's ever made for me." "You can put it on your wall, so you remember we're a family." "I don't need a reminder," Mackenzie said, "but I'll put it up anyway, because it's perfect." After Sophie went to bed, Thomas and Mackenzie ended up on the porch. It was their ritual now, these quiet moments after the day settled, when the important things could be said without weight or ceremony. "I've been thinking about something," Mackenzie said. "What's that?" "About that night on the highway, about you turning around." She was quiet for a moment. "You didn't know me. You had every reason to keep driving, but you stopped anyway." "I couldn't not stop." "Most people could have, would have." She looked at him. "Why couldn't you?" Thomas thought about his wife in that hospital bed, about being alone with grief and debt, and a daughter who needed him to keep standing, about all the people who'd looked away when he needed help, and the few who hadn't. "Because I have a daughter," he said, "and someday she's going to be out in the world making her own choices. And I want her to grow up knowing that when someone needs help, you stop. Even when it's inconvenient, even when it's scary, even when you have 40 minutes to make up on your route." He paused. "I want her to know that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. You're a good dad. I'm trying to be. Sophie's lucky." "We're all lucky," Thomas corrected. "All 3 of us." Mackenzie nodded. They sat in companionable silence, watching the moths circle the porch light. "Thank you," she said finally, "for not driving past me that night." "Thank you for getting in the truck," she smiled then, a real smile, full and unguarded. "Best decision I ever made." Inside, Sophie slept in her ocean-colored room, surrounded by drawings and books and the quiet certainty that she was loved. In her room, Mackenzie's laptop sat open on her desk, acceptance letter still pulled up on the screen, proving that futures could be rebuilt from wreckage. And on the front door, slightly crooked but hung with care, a handmade sign announced to anyone who cared to read it. This was the Mitchell house, and everyone who lived here had chosen to be family. The porch light stayed on, same as it did every night, not because anyone was lost anymore, but because home was worth marking, worth protecting, worth celebrating in all its imperfect, accidental, chosen glory. Thomas finished his coffee, stood to head inside. Tomorrow would bring new routes, new challenges, new moments requiring decision. But tonight, everyone was home. Everyone was safe. Everyone belonged. And that was everything.